Welcome to This is Yoga Therapy. I'm your host, Michele Lawrence. Join me as we venture beyond the mat into the fascinating intersections of yoga and health. Each episode brings you candid conversations with the visionary leaders and practitioners who are truly shaping this field, sharing their stories, insights, and the profound impact of yoga therapy in action. So today I'm joined by Robert Sturman. Robert's a dedicated yoga practitioner and a photographer. And I think this is kind of the first time we've had a photographer on the podcast. He doesn't just take pictures of yoga, he captures the figurative poetry of the human spirit in pursuit of healing. And from the streets of Manhattan to the cells of San Quentin, Robert's work reminds us there is beauty everywhere. And it's just real pleasure to meet you, Robert, and to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Michele. It's really nice to be here. It's quite an honor.
I'd love it if you could start by sharing just a bit more about yourself and how did yoga and photography come together for you?
Well, I was always an artist. And then there came a time when I felt that I needed support as a human being. And I grew up in Los Angeles, so yoga was all around.
Sure.
Not like today, of course. This is in the 80s.
Yeah.
So I would go to a class here and there. It took about 10 years before I decided that I really wanted some support with life. And I thought those yoga people really knew how to do life. So I thought that was a wonderful option to explore that path. And about 10 years later, when I started to really have that desire, I volunteered for a yoga magazine called Yogi Times, and I would do the teacher profile portrait once a month
Oh, cool.
because I figured if I wanted to be a yogi, I should immerse myself in the culture. And so I did that. And then I just realized that it was such a beautiful figurative poetry. And the first series that I did, it was a massive series on the beach of yogis opening their hearts to the heavens and reaching towards the divine. And I really saw that it was a way to tell an incredibly positive story about humanity. But it was also a very glorified interpretation, somewhat like Picasso's Acrobats on the Mediterranean. And it was very beautiful. And then one day, I was invited into a prison by a warden, and then everything changed.
Will you say more about that? Should we save that for later?
Whatever you want.
Let's maybe come back to that a little bit. What you were hinting at for me is that perhaps initially it felt a little glamorous yoga, right? And then ultimately it felt very humanizing and everywhere present, right? If I think about the difference between what's happening in a cancer class versus what's happening on the cover of Yoga Journal, right? Yoga can be so many different things. And what I'm hearing from you is that you started to take a look beyond the glamorous in a way, or the polished that we think of often, I think, when we think about yoga and yoga pants.
I did. After sharing this body of work for a while, I also began to receive a consistent thread of criticism that was, these aren't real people.
Uh-huh.
Why don't you show real people? And just at first I was like, what are you talking about? This is my art. And this is, I'm an artist, and this is my heart just like telling this story of humanity. And I would think like, they didn't say that about Michelangelo's David. That's not a real guy. So at first, it was hard for me to take in. But then, as I said, when I was invited into the prison and I started to really look at what this it wasn't a large number of people, but it came in enough that I'm sure a lot more people thought it as well. But it informed me, and they were right. And that opened me up to fulfilling a dream of wanting to be somewhat of a National Geographic type of photographer where I could photograph all of humanity. And yoga was my excuse to do that.
Very cool. So you have spoken on the TED stage, the TEDx stage, and you have a TEDx talk. You can find it on YouTube. We can include the links here too. And you speak about seeing our humanity through a photographer's eye. So I think I'm just kind of like threading out what you were just alluding to a little bit here. And in yoga therapy, we talk about the power of therapeutic relationship. And so I want to kind of compare the two a little bit for a moment. How does the act of being photographed, of being truly seen by another, because that's what you're doing here, serve as a therapeutic intervention for your subjects in a way, especially those who have felt unseen or broken by society? How does it give them that ability to be seen? And what's the therapeutic nature of that?
Well, I love that we're building this bridge between my life as an artist and your your life as a therapist. And so in no ways am I do I know I am not a yoga therapist.
Right. And I'm not a
And
photographer.
okay, I'll teach you though. So I think that when I'm in my work, I am so deeply committed to seeing the light in the person that I'm working with that and there's absolutely no way that that's not going to happen. And as it becomes visible to me, I get excited.
Hmm.
Nothing makes me happier. And I'm so ferociously engaged and consumed by the beauty that I'm seeing. Whatever it is, poetry, the sincerity, the struggle, whatever it is. And I think that people can feel that.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
And so that opens up a lot of doors because oftentimes when we first start working, people are very nervous.
Sure.
And I have to remember that because I'm so confident that we're going to get there. And just like that's what I do. And I have to remember when I was a subject, a model for a photographer doing yoga, I was terrified, you know? So, but right when that shift happens where they like immediately when something beautiful is in my lens, in my camera, I'll show it to them and they'll feel it. And then all of a sudden their head gets so big.
Mm.
They calm down.
Mhm. It's amazing. Yeah. Hmm. Let's talk about a few different populations that you've worked with. So you've photographed breast cancer survivors, veterans with PTSD. You mentioned being in the prisons as well. Um, so when a person's struggling with a body that feels like a battlefield, how does your camera help them reclaim a sense of dignity and wholeness? Is it through what you were just speaking of, giving them a glimpse into something different?
I think just honoring first of all, they when in order to make it to be photographed in the first place, they've done a lot of work to get there,
Mhm,
to reclaim their dignity.
mhm,
I am just reflecting back what I see. And it's just to me, it's like watering flowers so that they can just continue to blossom. And then I'll portray it in a way where it's very real, it's very honest, and it's also statuesque. It looks very important. It has a place where it belongs,
Mhm.
and I would think that that would help to perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably a common thread in many of your subjects, and I guess obviously in humanity too, but that thread being trauma. And in a yoga therapeutic setting, we discuss how addiction and trauma make the body feel like an unsafe place to be. And so you photographed men in maximum security prisons finding stillness. And maybe you can let us know what those men have taught you about the ability of a practice to shift a person's internal state from bracing to being. And feel free to share more about how this was kind of a turning point for you too, going inside the prisons.
Well, first of all, it was from doing, a comprehensive body of work of basically naked yogis on the beach. I mean, they're wearing clothes, but it's yoga clothes.
Yeah.
And, to going into maximum security prisons, that was a phenomenal experience to bridge humanity in that way and see that it did not matter if I was working with somebody that on the beach who would appear on the cover of a magazine or an individual serving a life sentence. That the common thread that I felt from people is that we light up when we are shown respect and we are seen. That's most of my I'm sure I had tough love learning here and there, but there was so much growth through encouragement and through pointing out where I was doing okay.
Mhm.
And so as far as, bracing, first of all, it informed me that yoga works. I mean, it
Mhm.
really works, which
Mhm.
is
Amen.
so cool
Yeah.
just to see that. But so recently there were 2 experiences. Once when I was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and before the class, when the teacher usually introduces me and asks if anyone has a problem with being photographed, and then I started to say a few words because I wanted to really let them know that I'm there to celebrate them. So, when I went into this prison and I said a few words about it and I said, "You know, I photograph yoga all over the world, and you guys are some of my favorite models," like that. And the roar of the crowd
I bet.
was so intoxicating, and they were just so grateful to be respected.
Mm.
It disarms them as well. I think they
Mhm.
were already disarmed, but so the next thing that happened was I recently went to a maximum security federal prison in Mexico, and these are really maximum security. Like, it takes an hour and a half just to go through security to get to it, and in this particular prison, it was a prison within a prison,
Uh-huh.
and all these guys live together in this one block. So, I'm in there waiting for them to come, and then they start to walk in from another activity that they did, and they were just walking in straight line and looking around a little, but just walking to go do something. It was the first time ever I had a visceral reaction, like of a very heavy energy.
Mm.
And I was extremely off balance for a few moments. And then they all grabbed a yoga mat and started unrolling their mats. And there was absolutely zero heaviness whatsoever.
Mhm.
And again, when I told them that I was there to celebrate how awesome that they were for showing so much sincerity and inspiring others in this practice, they just went crazy too.
Mhm. I'm constantly kind of thinking about what you're doing as a photographer and what we yoga therapists and yoga teachers do and the ways we do it, right? These different sort of interventions, if you will, but both to see and bring forth the best potential in a person, right? The human spirit, if you will. Like we're calling that forth, you're calling that forth. And then I think about the way that I operate. So as a yoga therapist, I'm assessing a client through a variety or various lenses, right? Different layers of their being to get an overall picture of their health. And so when you're looking through your lens, perhaps you can let us know what cues or expressions of the body tell you that a person has finally dropped into their own internal home. You've disarmed them already, you've shared that a bit. So they're dropping in, but what other cues are you looking for or noticing or assessing or kind of feeling into?
Well, I'm so privileged because they're all doing yoga,
Mhm.
and that's the cue.
Mhm.
They get there without me.
Yeah. There are things that you notice though. You've noticed the stillness, right? And you've mentioned that the yoga works, right? Is
Yeah.
there also like body opening? Is there armor dropping? Is it all of that and different for each person each time?
I think that what I described earlier about just lighting up,
Lighting up.
I think that's my cue.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's my cue. It's very different because in your profession, you really have to look closely at the mechanics of the pose and everything. I'm just looking for the beauty, and then I show them the camera oftentimes, and they make a correction.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's much more, I imagine it's much more relaxed.
Mhm.
A
Yeah, and as a yoga therapist, we're looking beyond the physical body too to see what we can notice, right? Energetically, the words, the language that people are using. We use this word bracing before, softening, things like that are cues to us as well. So, um, and we're the ones inviting the participant, the care receiver, to meet themselves where they are, go through a series of things, whether it be yoga, asana, or breath work or other practices, to feel those things, to experience those things. So I do hear what you say about like the yoga is the backdrop and we're the ones facilitating that in our profession and you're there to capture it. So you've worked extensively with the Veterans Yoga Project. How is your work with veterans? Is it any different than working with other populations? Are there some things really specific that you see or more general that you can share about your work with veterans?
I think working with veterans has just been a tremendous honor, and I'm always starstruck by these human beings that are truly in service and willing to give their lives for something. And I've photographed amputees, and they're rebuilding their lives and learning how to become whole again. And but they're deeply devoted to a practice. And I just see so much sincerity and a desire to heal. and so much humbleness.
So you've called your work positive propaganda, is that right? Did I read that somewhere?
I don't know where you read that, but I do know there was a time when I said that a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
How can powerful imagery of yoga in unlikely places like San Quentin or war zones help change the clinical and cultural narrative around what it means to recover?
Well, the term comes from the idea that a photograph is a great idea. Well, in my case, I would think they're great ideas, but it's an idea. Usually propaganda is a negative one. So it's an idea. And so what I try to do is find these incredible ideas like yoga with the military or yoga in prisons, and then make these strong, poetic, emotional photographs of that idea so that people have an experience. Because when we're moved by it, we tend to remember it. And so one of the things that I try to do is put as much of that work out into the world so that the news spreads. Because I don't know any greater carrier of the news than photographs.
Mhm.
And so that's what I try to do, take great ideas and then put them into the culture more so that they eventually can become part of it and it can become normalized. Like yoga in the military, of course there's yoga in the military. That's why they go to the military.
Mhm. So typically, I finish the podcast with a question about the person I'm speaking with, about their own yoga practice. And so I'd like to do that here, but also see how it serves you in the work that you do, right? So you're often in spaces where the world can feel really heavy: prisons, hospitals, centers for orphans. How do you use your own yoga practice? What's it like to embrace that, to prepare you for that, to help you feel stable in who you are so you can be present for your subjects as you witness sometimes really horrible situations, right? So you can keep pointing to the beauty. So tell us about your yoga practice and how it helps you in those ways.
Well, that's the most important question that I've been asked because it's a work in progress. And I can't claim to have the ability to clear it out. It's very tricky because I can't look the other way and I don't numb. So I have to learn these tools. But at the same time, it doesn't take away the heaviness of it.
Sure.
And so I feel that I want to learn more. And maybe that's why I'm all of a sudden pulled into the world of yoga therapist because maybe you have the answer. But I feel like I live with a broken heart. It's like the Khalil Gibran when he talks about the joy and the pain, the joy and the sorrow, and learning how to let them simultaneously live within you.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm learning. But it's very hard. And not just the prisons and the children's homes and war, but also I have a dog who's an animal testing survivor. So I've become very much aware of what goes on, how animals are exploited. And that to me is so beyond overwhelming
Mm.
that I am learning how to hold that and be effective in this world and still have joy and just go forward. And my practice consists of a lot of quiet
Mhm.
where I just can breathe and do nothing, meditation.
Yeah.
and being with the people and animals that I love. And I do some yoga, yes, of course. And I also have a consistent ice practice that I've been doing for about 6 years now.
That like a cold plunge?
Yes, cold plunge.
Great.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
helps me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as I said, I'm still learning.
Beautiful. We're all still learning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes. At 87 years old, Michelangelo said, I am still learning.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? Some new projects that you are about to put out in the world or what you're most passionate about? I'll definitely share some links as to where folks can see your work.
Well, one thing that I'm excited about is I'm coming into your world as a presenter, a special guest at IAYT in Costa Mesa I
Great.
believe it's in June.
I'll meet you then in person.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then the other thing I would like to ask the audience to consider
Mhm.
is to take in little by little how conditioned we are to accept the astronomical exploitation of animals that occurs on planet Earth.
Mm.
It's a lot. And you don't, it doesn't have to happen overnight, but I feel like it's more of us need to see it and take it in and not turn away from it. So little by little, the horrors that they go through on this planet that most of humanity has accepted as normal.
Thank you so much for bringing that into our awareness and for your work and for taking the time to share with me and visit with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation and I look forward to meeting you in person in June.
I look forward to meeting you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. If you're interested to learn more about who we are and what we do, check us out at innerpeaceyogatherapy.com.